Starting to wonder if there's any point continuing to make videos because, I mean, sometimes what is the point? But hopefully, at least, someone who was, someone who I tag or send it to has got to think something is significant. So, all these polls, these state polls, what's Trump polling at? There's something wrong with this whole process and procedure. And like that, court case with the Dartmoor, where, they tried to claim that, people couldn't actually camp with a tent or didn't have a right to stop there, when you have a right to do that if you're out walking and you're tired or whatever, in the medical reasons. And, there's loads of benches, park benches being installed for recreational purposes. Those court cases totally ignore obvious and basic facts. And it's kind of really serious when you're in court, and the fact that they're overlooking certain things. That being an example, I use that as an example. When we go on to these elections, right? When you have an election, you're meant to get people's vote. It is a poll, the ballot. And when it's for politics, there are certain rules and regulations, and to be honest, the regulations for broadcasting, there's been a lot of question over Jacob Rees-Mogg, and, I found another act of law which actually states that it's actually the fact that it's Mogg and that he's an elected MP when he's not supposed to be broadcasting and influencing people, even outside of elections and so forth. And even if it may influence people, it's not actually on the fact of whether GB News is a news programme or whether it's an entertainment programme. Things like that. And this whole new phenomenon of polls, what are people polling at? Trump's now polling at this, Trump's now polling at that. When you've got the ability to actually hold a vote, like on YouTube, you've got, voting. On YouTube, people are actually voting, on what they think to things or who they like. Whenever you collected anyone's opinion on a political matter, that's meant to be official, submissible to the government. Even when you're petitioning, now every account on YouTube and on the internet is linked electronically to an address which you can send a message to through that website, and is contactable. And, Musk is now even getting people to validate, their ID on that X app. And in these voting, what we've actually started doing is taking for granted something that is actually very valuable. Now, in America, or anywhere, all these newspapers and magazines reporting all these figures all the time, all the way through and in between. So it's Trump's polling at this, Trump's polling at that, his popularity polls, but they're actually asking questions. Now, the thing is, you're only meant to ask people something at the time you're asking it. Because otherwise, anytime you're asking people who are identifiable, right, with contactable addresses, and you're asking them questions, and they're actually giving a say or a vote, this is collecting actual data. And therefore, it's actually all valid. Now, some of these channels that are collecting votes effectively, and every person on there is actually identifiable, and you're putting a question, these could be submitted to Parliament. Some people are walking around with a bit of paper, desperately trying to save a park or do something in a local area to a council, or even, petitioning government, when you've got these channels with millions who are, literally flying with, millions of subscribers actually voting. It is voting now. And the whole thing with Trump all these other politicians, oh, he's pulling at this, it's pulling at that. Well, that means that, you know, if you know, is this actually, this is basically it's now turned into an open 24/7 365 poll. And you're only meant to ask people what they think and vote in an election, right? Because otherwise, why would you have the money? I mean, even in the legislation, you know, it's meant to be saying that elections are meant to be free, but then there's referendum elections and so forth, only certain money can be expended on, you know, on it and so forth and so forth. Well, when you stop using paper and printing and hiring out polling stations, then, you know, your overheads and costs significantly go down, and you don't need people to volunteer if it's all been run digitally, which, you know, what about those consultations on the internet? There's something actually really, really wrong now. There's something really, 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 really wrong happened. And this is now like, they are literally live, what they're doing is live tracking or live plotting people's opinion. And that is wrong. Because the legislation and law, which is around what can be broadcast and what can be published around petitions and elections, and even outside of that period, and regarding MPs in broadcasting like Rees-Mogg, is they're not supposed to be influencing people in elections and voting the politicians. They're elected to do a job, and they do the job, right? Unless you're running for election, then you're promoting. But what's happening is, actually, Biden, you see, when Biden's telling them to take certain things down from YouTube, when people are actually either petitioning a case or in elections, he's actually influencing the perception of his opponents in elections, and even influencing their success on the internet. And that is why YouTube can't remove RFK videos. Legally, they're not supposed to be allowed, or even petitions. This is the freedom of press, our freedom of press. And all the newspaper and media that, you know, they've admitted now is all, even RFK is saying that, you know, a lot of the main press is owned by certain companies. What they're doing with these polls is they themselves are really trying informations. They're testing stories out on one candidate or another candidate. And then what they're doing is these polls they're constantly running are giving a feedback on how it affects someone's popularity. So, you know, like RFK got a chance to speak I think he got a chance to speak in Congress. They tried to stop him, but a Republican let him speak, and then he got to speak in some other popular things, and then suddenly he suddenly got loads of support, and he just suddenly got loads of donations coming in, and so forth. Well, that is going to affect his success, whether he's got finances or not. Right? So what you've got is, you've got Biden and the regime is actually breaking the laws of those election rules, because his job is to run the government, not to interfere with his opponents in their campaigns. And you're not even meant to, you know, when he was saying he didn't want to debate them, you know, there is some real issues now around the principles of fairness in elections and voting. There's a principle of fairness, and they worked it out that, you know, we've got these mediums of newspapers and television, and they calculated that it's not fair. MPs they've got a job that we've elected, and they're not supposed to be able to use their privileged position when they get elected, they're almost made celebrities or made into famous people, and they've got a voice. They're not allowed to use that to affect them getting voted or not getting voted. They can only use it on the matters that they've been elected to represent. So, you know, in Parliament, you know, they've got a job to do to run the government, you know, but they're not allowed to really go on to the subjects or voice other opponents when it's outside, like outside of the chamber. You oppose your opponents in the chamber. That's what it is, Parliament is to be secured for debate and free speech, right? For the running of the country in debate. So the debates, actually, we elect them to have the debates. That's why they go all the way to Parliament to have the debates, right? Otherwise, what's the point in them having Parliament? I think that's what it actually meant. The essence of it was effectively that if they're going to debate it on TV, then what's the point in having Parliament? I think that is what the essence of it is. If you were going to debate politics on TV, then why would we need to send them to the chamber in Parliament? And, and how did they get into the chamber? Through publicity. Now, they're not meant to be using the TV for their own publicity, particularly when it's affecting, voting. When it's a TV programme like the BBC paid for by the licence fee or whatever, it's not meant to... Basically, if you're asked on TV to talk about the work you're doing in government, it's not a self-promotion. It's not meant to be a PR for you getting elected next time. I think that's what it comes down to. And that's the thing with MOG. MOG is a constant advert for MOG. Now, what the law says, contrary to what Professor Tim Wilson and this select committee chairman, who I thought was very good, I don't think he was good enough now, though. Because even the rules on Ofcom, they've actually overlooked something. And when you look at it in the election referendum rules, it has a section on the broadcasting, and it says, basically, because they're a politician, they're not allowed to have shows and do programmes, not the fact of what type of show it is. They're just not allowed to have them, right? It clearly says that. And also, when they're speaking and discussing and being interviewed, it's not only comments they make or material that affect an election or affect their opponents. It's actually, it does say in that act very clearly, anything that could or might affect the outcome. So Ofcom really are off the ball, and that select committee member who actually was very, he was pulling the Ofcom on loads of things that they'd done wrong, but that select committee itself is, he was off the page. I don't think that he even considered that other act, or forgotten about it, or knew about it. And it clearly says, even when you're outside of the referendum period and on election period, and it also says anything that may affect the outcome of elections or voting, not will, things that they say that will, it's that they might or could. So, and it's absolutely down to because the person is an elected member, So, because of all this social media and technology, the whole system has been disrupted, but we've still got these laws. We should make them comply with these laws, even if, GB News want to have all these different people on. At the moment, the law is the law. We can't just ignore the law and pretend that, it's invalid, because then, not for these things, because then, you get criminals saying, well, if MPs are just ignoring the law, then why shouldn't we all? So, and then when it comes to protected speech and protected videos where people are themselves not elected MPs, but they're running, campaigns or trying to get elected, they're actually getting taken down or removed from YouTube, which is ruining their chances. And that is, freedom of access to press. So, and now in this tumultuous act that clearly states that, petitions that were to the government are meant to have a special prosecution procedure for them through the 1661 Act, what was meant to be the King's Bench and the Assizes. Now, we've actually found that, and then after they've been prosecuting people, then they decided that all prosecutions are illegal in 1688. So that is just, they were hiding the act. I tried to find the act. It was mentioned a few times, and I did actually become aware of it, but Edward Fitzgerald had done a huge, extensive study, and it wasn't in his first book. He said he's got more material that he hasn't used yet, but he hasn't mentioned that. I was trying to find the full wording of that act, and then it suddenly just magically appeared on the internet, that tumultuous act. So, you know. But these polls, these ongoing polls, constantly polling. There's no point having an election. If you already know someone's popularity at any given moment, why would you have a poll? You're meant to have a poll to, find out who people like. But if you're already polling, and then if the newspapers are finding that they can affect the polls by what they're publishing, wow, we published this story and suddenly someone's popularity's gone down. Isn't that why you can't have Jacob Rees-Mogg or other certain people on there? Because of that. But this also shows what effect the media is having on them, let alone the MPs. Now, the MPs have got a privilege of being well-known and famous because we elected them. So, but the newspapers are there all the time. They're meant to give us the news. They're not meant to be really doing influencer material, So there's something really wrong about this whole thing. And this is what Robert F. Kennedy's saying now. He's saying that, Biden's even rigging the elections so that even if he wins a certain percentage in certain states, he can't win. So, and if they own a lot of the major newspapers, although now we've got this upsurgence of independent, like The Hill and, Novara Media and other independent media, but then they get sucked into those bigger stations like GB News because they're actually doing really, really well and standing for independence, but then they end up they get hoovered up by these big companies and they get sucked into them because they want to try and get more fame for themselves or more fame for the channel rather than just doing a good job at, reporting the news. And it's almost like a contagious disease in a way, and entertainment does the same. It sucks people up, sucks people into theatres, sucks people into cinemas. Then they're all sat in these chairs facing one way. It's not sucking people into, social gatherings or meetings when they can dance, discuss, engage, socialise. They've got everyone in these groups on, Facebook, blocking and banning if they don't say the right thing or, if they don't say the right topic, Can you imagine if you were in a hall and, you had a group of scientists and you were at a party and you walked over to them and you started talking to them, and they said, oh, are you a scientist? No, well, we don't know how to talk to you, are you a fly fisher? It's actually antisocial. There were lots of, it's got into people's minds now, all these group admins and so forth. If you don't say the right thing, it is actually antisocial. Mark Zuckerberg, actually, no matter what, he's done for people being able to come together in groups and be able to get information on certain things they're interested in. He's still, there's a very strong antisocial kind of streak through it all. Very strong, but he claimed to have a social platform. And I don't think it's helping or has helped social engagement. It's enabled people to put up and share information that they might be interested in. And for like-minded people, providing that, just because you're like-minded and you're talking about certain topics, these obedience, you can talk about this topic and nothing but the topic, the whole topic, then nothing but the topic, there's something very, very wrong about that. If you happen to be in, a group of people that you are all interested in something and you're like-minded, that's why you come together. But then if you're speaking to someone, and you're getting on with them and you think there's something you want to mention that might not happen to be on that topic, but I'm not allowed to speak, in a squash club on a halfway through a, squash. When people are playing squash, so when these businessmen like Trump are playing tennis, They talk about business. I'm going to meet with my business partner at Mar-a-Lago. Let's have a tennis game and let's talk business. Oh, no, Donald, we can't talk business while we're playing tennis. It's Mark. I'm playing tennis with Mark. This is Tennis Geeks Club. Hey, Mark Zuckerberg, let's play tennis. It's like, hey, let's have a game of tennis with Mark. Okay, hit the ball. So then, Mark, how you fancy investing in my company? Oh, no, don't talk about tennis now. I'm halfway through a game. Don't talk about business investments in my tennis game. It's a tennis club for tennis talk, Oh no, these elites are free. They're free to talk. It's Trump's golf match. Let's have a game of golf and talk business. Oh no, you can only talk about golf when you're golfing, Donald. This is it. And that's the thing with Mark. And people have got it into their brains now, these admins and moderators, and they've become like mini Hitlers, mini fascists, there is this sense of, order, but the type of order that I think Mark and Bill Gates want, like, Minesweeper, is that, they're trying to turn us into machines that are programmed in binary, and they talk about, I'm in room 7C, you can only say 5 different words in this room, U, A, in, out, up, down, and then, follow the program. And then when you go into another room, this room can only be used certain words in, homogeneous, bidogenous, gynogenous, homogeneous, and then room 7-5. It's like the BBC building, isn't it? Oh, it's room 73C on floor 6, where, Alan Partridge is conjuring up, weird, paedophile programs of Jimmy Savile, which is controversial. You can only think up of controversial, weird programs in room 785C7. There's something wrong about that. Particularly when it's only meant to be social. It's not work. It's meant to be fun and enjoyable. There's something really wrong with these polls and the whole procedure on the internet anyway.